Welcome back to How to Tickle Yourself. I'm your host, Duff McDonald, along with my co-host, Matt McButter. I met today's guest about 20 years ago. She was friends with my ex-wife. Ellen worked on Wall Street. I was a writer. I smoked weed at the time, but it never would have occurred to me to ask her if she wanted some. She just did not seem like the type. Fast forward 2 decades, and Ellen is the host of How to Do the Pot, a podcast about women and their experiences with cannabis. She's what they call a cannabis entrepreneur. She's hosted well over 150 episodes about women and this medicinal plant on topics from stress to sleep to sex to endometriosis. Just scrolling through the titles of her episodes makes me a little jealous as a podcast host. She did a Thanksgiving special on the munchies, one on why does cannabis make people paranoid, cannabis for better sex, and one on her favorite strain, Acapulco Gold, which, if memory serves, was also Cheech and Chong's favorite. I wanted to call this episode How to Smoke Pot Like a Girl, but I figured I might get a little flack for that, so we're going with How to Smoke Pot Like a Woman. Ellen Scanlon is a marijuana advocate's dream, someone who had almost no interest in smoking or consuming cannabis while it was illegal, who found her way to the plant for medical reasons, and is now a full-throated advocate for responsible cannabis use. Welcome to the show, Ellen. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion, right here, right now, right here, right now, whoa, right here, right now.
So we should just start at the beginning here. You had an interesting entree into cannabis use, and I believe the episode, or one of the episodes in which you described it, was called How Breaking 16 Teeth Led Me to Cannabis. That sounds like a lot of fun. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, the 16 teeth. I know, I feel like through the airwaves, I can hear people shuddering whenever I say that. It was not a great day. I was in New Orleans for Jazz Fest with my now husband and fell off a bike and had a bunch of injuries, including breaking 16 of my teeth. And the sort of the long and short of it is that I had been a person who did whatever any doctor ever told me to do. And I had this really bad accident and I wasn't getting better. And so I had to learn to advocate for myself. And I had to learn to say no and get second opinions and do all kinds of things that felt very uncomfortable for someone who just likes to go to the doctor and say, I just make me better, please. And that really, I think, opened me up to, as you said, a path that was not expected, which is becoming an advocate for something that is, as my lawyer father tells me, still illegal. And really starting to understand that some of the things that we all learned very specifically about cannabis are probably not what is actually true. The war on drugs and the propaganda and the fear and all kinds of nefarious things led to, I think, a lot of the beliefs that we all share about cannabis. And so as I recovered and then stepped into another sort of health challenge, which was infertility and learning that I had endometriosis, which I didn't even know what it was. And 1 in 10 women have endometriosis. It's a very painful condition that causes 50 to 60% of infertility, and cannabis is an incredible treatment for it. And so cannabis has changed my life in many ways, but once a month, it really, really changes my life and allows me to be with my child, be in my business, be in my life in a way that the drugs that I could take, prescription or over the counter, they worked as well, but I had a lot of side effects. And so I think that my journey is similar to a lot of women's journeys with cannabis, which is that there are other things that work, but they just have really bad side effects. So that is the roots of my advocacy are with my 16 teeth.
Amazing. So, I mean, there still is, I mean, even up here in Canada, it's been legal since, nationwide since I think October 2018, if I recall, October 18th, 2018, but who's counting? Or thereabouts. But, and I think there's still a lot of stigma. I mean, in certain populations, I think there are those that as soon as it became legal, sort of felt like, okay, now I can try it for the first time, right? Like, because it was that was actually a barrier to them. But I think there are others who are still kind of look at it as like group it in with drugs. Like when we were growing up, drugs was this one kind of monolithic thing, right? Where, it wasn't really that much of a difference. It was maybe a matter of degree, but, pot and crack were both drugs. So do you think that's still, I mean, is that how, I mean, is that part of your mission? Are you out there kind of like combating that stigma, or do you feel like it's lifting?
I feel like the answer is yes and no, because I've lived in San Francisco now since 2009, and I lived in New York City for a long time where, Duff and I knew each other, and it felt like cannabis was legal in New York City then. And I have heard that it really feels like it now, even though anything that you buy right now in New York State is illegal, even if it looks like it isn't. Stigma is just, it's such a tough thing to talk about. I think that it's really more about fear. And, I know How to Tickle Yourself goes deep into sort of what the real emotion that is driving whatever action might be. And I think people are afraid of cannabis. And so they respond to it in ways that people respond to things when they are afraid, and they can get mad at it. They can want to stay away from it. There are just all kinds of emotions that it elicits. And so one of the reasons that my show is called How to Do the Pot is because when I was first kind of socializing it with people, I would say, I'm going to teach you how to do the pot. And everyone would laugh. Yeah. And I thought that is a perfect place to start with this plant, because we kind of all need to start over. And so, yes, I do think that stigma is real. I think that legalization and the rapid pace of it is making people think about it a little bit differently. I just got a text this morning from a very conservative friend who wants some sleep help. And so I think that, it's also just I think the pandemic helped people to realize that everyone's just trying to get through the day. And if weed helps you get through the day and doesn't cause any issues, then I really hope that we can all sort of open up to what that future might look like.
And we were talking just before we started recording here. You are, with the podcast in particular, you are on the cusp of a rolling wave here. When you started there, I think you said there were 11 legal states, and now there's what, 21?
21.
And does that legality on a state-by-state basis, you think, is opening up use by women in particular more than men? Because I don't want to sound sexist here, but clearly in my own experience, if you took even a couple, it was more likely the man smoked weed than the woman. So what's changing there?
I think cannabis as a tool for improving your well-being and improving your health. And women tend to look to cannabis and find cannabis as a solution for things like stress and pain. Autoimmune disease affects women significantly more than men. Things like migraines are significantly more women are much more likely to have a lot of conditions that cannabis has been very helpful for. And so I think that smoking, I've been thinking about this in the past week or so. Like, I just feel like smoking is something that can kind of draw people on one side or the other. Green Wednesday is a very big day in the cannabis industry. It is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and data has just come out. It was the second highest sales day for cannabis. And over Thanksgiving weekend, $300 million worth of cannabis was sold in the US. And edibles continue to just really increase in popularity. And so I think that edibles have changed a lot of people's relationship with cannabis because they're discreet. I think discretion is something, if you are feeling stigma and you can do something in a discreet way, I think that that allows you to dial in how you want to feel and no one really has to know. And so I think that edibles are really changing things. Cannabis beverages are becoming very popular, especially with women. There's still a long way to go. It's a teeny part of the market, but historically, men have been much more likely to be cannabis consumers than women. But it's a rapidly growing industry. And in legal states like California, it's nearly 50-50. And California probably has the most sophisticated cannabis market in the US because we were the first state to legalize medical cannabis in 1996. So I think it is kind of a wave. These things just take a little bit of time. And as the form factors become something that you are more familiar with, it's much easier to incorporate it into your life.
Now, with a country, so politically polarized, like the USA, I mean, up here, we're polarized too, but we're a small country. And for some reason, Canada, Amsterdam, whatever, we just went the whole country at the same time. And people, I think, accepted it. I'm wondering if there will be more friction in the States. For instance, Duff and I actually have a mutual good friend who lives in Charleston, South Carolina. And he said he would be he said it's like got to be 80%. I mean, no scientific study or anything, but he would estimate 80% of people are like staunch anti-cannabis in a state like that, like where they will go kicking and screaming to the pool, like it would have to be nationalized. It wouldn't be by state. So, I mean, do you think do you think there's someone like Biden even during, like, do you think it's going to go like nationally at some point? Because that always freaks me out a little bit to know, especially as a, not that I ever would, but like as a, as a foreigner, when I come to your country, let's say I'm even in a legal state, knowing that it's illegal at a federal level is always a little bit scary, right? Like,
well, alcohol prohibition ended because the federal government wanted to tax it. And they wanted to make money on all of the alcohol that was being sold. And so I think that people in South Carolina like money just like people in California and New York and all these other states. And so I really think that tax revenue is driving legalization in more conservative areas. Just in this past election in November, Missouri, which had been a medical state, became the 21st state to have legal cannabis for adults over 21. And I think that that's a bit of a surprise. Illinois, so it's been a Western thing. Now it's becoming a Northeastern thing. Virginia, where I went to school, which I think many people were very surprised, especially as a strong tobacco state, has legal cannabis. So I truly do think that the patchwork of alcohol laws in the U.S. and the length of time that it has taken to get anything close to uniformity is probably a model that we have to have some patience with. But I think that the money is just it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And what about so didn't they just have an amnesty for federal marijuana crimes?
Yes. So Biden came out and he pardoned everyone that has a federal cannabis conviction. Now, the number is only about 6,500 people. Where really there are a lot of people in prison is at the state level. And the governor of Oregon, the week before Thanksgiving, pardoned everyone who had a marijuana possession conviction. That's what Biden did as well. This is just possession. It's having it in your person. And that was 45,000 people in Oregon.
Wow.
So the numbers at the state level are so enormous, and the ramifications are so devastating. I mean, you can't get a lease, you can't get a decent apartment, you can't get a student loan. There are so many things that having a conviction like that on your record prohibits you from. And especially, I think it's very, very hard, even if you do not really believe that cannabis should be legal. It's hard to believe that anyone who just possessed it should have a conviction that has just changed the course of their lives.
Well, and in a state where it's no longer a crime, it does seem, doesn't it seem like there should just be some kind of blanket automatic, okay, that's not a crime anymore. So everybody gets pardoned who was convicted of that previous crime.
And there's a lot of talk right now. There's been a lot of talk since I've been in the industry about what the federal government is going to do. But last week, I think Biden came out and for the first time in 50 years has now created an opportunity for the federal government to study cannabis. So that is an actual law that was passed. So there has been, I mean, I think we all, especially in the industry, there's so much passion and so much excitement, and things are going more slowly than I think some people expected, especially following Canada and thinking like, oh, we're just a snap around the corner. But there really have been some progress that we all do need to celebrate.
So you talked, you mentioned a lot, both your entree from that accident, but health issues, and obviously from your show, you're clearly a health advocate. Where are you on recreational use?
I love weed. I mean, I think it's fantastic and I love it for fun. I have a little less time than I used to. I have a 4-year-old and it's been a pandemic. And so there's just been a little bit less fun in my life. And I actually really love to smoke a joint. My husband and I have some outdoor space. And if that's like a Saturday night, that's a really fun night for me. I think that like a lot of people who know a lot about cannabis and know how to sort of dial in what I like, I drink less alcohol. I was never a heavy drinker, but I love an IPA on a Friday or a Saturday night, but that's kind of it for me. And I can have an edible either before or after, or if I'm at home, generally, that's when I'm smoking. But I love cannabis. I think that it is an incredible plant for fun and for health and for well-being. Acapulco Gold is one of my favorite strains. My birthday a few years ago, I brought a bunch of pre-rolls on a boat with friends in the San Francisco Bay, and it was just such a fantastic, fantastic day. So I love weed. I just, the fun part, it's more just like being a mom of a toddler, running a startup, all kinds of other things. But when I have time, if I have, an afternoon to myself, it's lovely. It's also great for exercise. I love to swim. And so I can take like a low dose edible. That's generally what I like. I love CBD. CBD is a cannabinoid that works really well for me, and it's non-intoxicating, but it's very balancing to the system. We all have an endocannabinoid system, which was discovered only like 20, 25 years ago, but we all have them. It's just like the nervous system or the cardiovascular system. And its entire role is to balance the rest of the body. So I get a lot of the benefits from feeling like my endocannabinoid system is balanced by bringing in what they call exogenous cannabinoids, which just means the weed. And it's like a lock and key.
So do we have, exogenous meaning like external, I guess, but so do we have I've heard of this before, like we have a endocannabinoid system. That's a tough one. Duff, I got one for you.
You can call it the ECS.
Yeah, the ECS. And so normally are there some kind of internal, normally is it being triggered with internal
so the runner's
neurotransmitters and stuff,
which everyone has talked about forever, is truly the endocannabinoid system. And that feeling that you get when you are, when you feel tickled, when you feel a great amount of exercise, when you feel amount of love, like that, those are all the feelings of a balanced endocannabinoid system.
So endorphins are that,
endorphins are actually not really what causes it. It's actually the endocannabinoid system. And so I'm hopeful that like endorphins is sort of a word in the lexicon that no one really knows what it means and it's hard to say. So just say endocannabinoid system.
All right.
So So for me, we went out to a music festival in Denver a couple years ago to see Sturgill Simpson, Stevie Wonder, a couple other people,
Wow.
Florence, and it was the first time I'd ever been to a music festival where you could actually tell that most of the people were not intoxicated on alcohol. Most of the people were high, and it was the best music vibe I've ever been around. And that was the first time I tried dispensary edibles. And also we got some pre-rolled sativa, and it was my first time I had like a dispensary sativa. And we took this guy said, just smoke one hit in the morning. You don't need coffee. Your day will be great. So we did that. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a genius on one hit of sativa. It turns me into a little genius. Everything I say is more interesting. Where are you on the strains? What do you, I know it's a huge question, but what about the main divide, sativa and indica?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe in it. It's the plant has been around for so long. Everything is a hybrid. It's very challenging to, everyone is affected a little bit differently. What I like to say is sort of energizing weed, balancing weed, or sort of weed that mellows you out. And I think especially when I'm encouraging people to go to a dispensary and buy, I really encourage them not to ask for sativa or indica, but instead to have a little bit longer of a conversation and say, how do you want to feel? Like if you want to replace coffee, every bud tender at a dispensary will know exactly which way to point you. If you want to sleep better, they'll know the same thing. But because everyone's endocannabinoid system is a little bit different, you know, and this happens a lot with my husband. We'll smoke the same joint and have different effects from it. And partly it's because women's hormones, depending on where I am in my cycle, cannabis can be 30% more potent, the exact same weed, just depending on my hormones. So everyone is different. This is why my podcast is also called How to Do the Pot, because it is not as easy as just like opening up a can or opening up a bottle of wine. You kind of need to know yourself and what you like and be able to ask for it and then sort of test it out. Like, is this how I really like to feel? If not, I mean, I'm not the most fun person to smoke weed with because I will ask you 400 questions. But it's because I'm so curious, because I really want to find, I know there is a perfect weed for everyone. There are so many strains, as you said. And so it's just, really, we have a list of 12 on our website. And we recently put out a series called What is Good Weed? Because everyone is like, oh, this is the best weed. And I'm like, what does that mean? So I think the best weed is when you really match it to exactly what you want to do. And so that's what we've tried to guide people towards.
Like dog breeds. All dogs descended from wolves, but sometimes you get a terrier that behaves a little bit like a lab. And maybe that's what you need.
That's a great way to think about it.
That's really, so I have a question on that though. Like I saw that, I haven't listened to this episode yet, but I want to. Why does cannabis make people paranoid or make some people paranoid? Can you get into that a little bit? Because,
I have a theory first. Before
Okay.
Ellen answers, I have a theory. So, when my marriage was not going well and my drinking was not going well either, I suddenly became paranoid on weed, and I actually pretty much stopped smoking it for years. And at one point down the road, I tried it again, and I was like, oh my God, it doesn't make me paranoid. And then I was like, oh, it was all about how I was feeling separate from the weed. It's like it's all context.
My
Anyway,
theory has been that it does kind of depend on different strains, right? Like some of them can make you more paranoid than others. But I'll tell you my overarching theory is that it certainly wouldn't make me paranoid now, but it used to make me paranoid when it was illegal because my paranoia was like, what if the cops come? What if I think, what if they have this place bugged? You know, don't talk about it on the phone ever. You never know. You never know.
What do the pros say, Ellen?
You know, I think set and setting, and that meaning internal and external, have a lot to do with it. I think that the pros would tell you that it's terpenes, which are sort of it's almost like the aromatherapy portion of cannabis. But I find that an easier, much more practical way to tell people to keep from getting paranoid is lower THC and more CBD. The more CBD that is in whatever you are consuming, it will have that balancing effect without being intoxicating. And you can get the benefits of sort of the head high. But there are some people really love high THC products. But when I talk to people, like the guy at the Apple store who tells me that he used to love weed, but he got so paranoid, I'm like, try smoking weed that has no more than 22% THC in it and see if that helps. Because higher THC levels connect to a portion of your brain, and that is what can cause paranoia. So I think that that's really a huge benefit of the legal market. Number one, you're not paranoid that you're doing something illegal, but also you can see what you are buying and you can see what you're putting in your body. And maybe that joint that you got that has 37% THC made you feel paranoid. Well, try one with 22% and see if the same thing happens. And I am just a big proponent of try one or two hits, see how you feel, give it a couple minutes. Paranoia is something that you can also manage with my favorite tip that everyone should know, which is have a CBD oil tincture. You can buy CBD in all 50 states. Put it under your tongue for 30 to 60 seconds, and it will bring down your high, and you'll feel much more like yourself in about 15 minutes. So it's sort of a get out of jail free.
Wow.
Yeah. It doesn't that mean you sort of wasted your money on the weed that you bought? Like it straightens you out.
Or it's like the perfect step to finding the weed that works really well for you. And I think that there are steps to finding the right weed. I wish that I could I have 166 episodes. So and I have so much more to say because this really is nuanced and complicated and different for everyone. So yeah, think of it as an opportunity to get to know, to find the next best strain for your best experience.
Now, Duff, I know you're not a big fan of, quantification and numbers, but legalization, bringing in the quantification in this case, I have to say has been such a game changer. Because,
Sure.
Back in the day, someone would just pull out a joint, be like, what's this? Be like, what do you mean? It's a fucking joint. Smoke it. Where'd it come from? My brother-in-law, I think it's his homegrown or he got it from his buddy. Okay. Right. And then you'd smoke it. Now it's like, what's this?
Weed.
This is, it's a 0.5 gram pre-roll of Girl Guide cookies, sativa, hybrid, whatever. Now it's like kind of like what happened with beer too, right? Where it's like, oh, this is a hazy IPA with a hint of, it used to just be, what's this? It's a beer, drink it.
I got one I'm going to give you for free, Ellen. You can use this after we talk today. One thing occurred to me after I was at the first dispensary. I was like, oh my God, the difference between alcohol and dispensary weed is alcohol we tend to buy for taste, and we aren't so concerned about the drunk, the high. It all sort of blurs into itself. With dispensary weed, it's flipped it on its head, right? Yes, you can, they do all the silly little edible candies and stuff, but the taste is a sideshow, right? You're not shopping for the taste, you're shopping for the high. So it actually turned upside down our relationship with an intoxicant, and it put it in the right direction. Right. Because, taste is easy and accessible. But, if you have 4 glasses of that wine, it doesn't matter what wine you had. You're going to be the same way. Whereas weed, we can now sort of I was just shocked at how much you can pinpoint, like you said, Ellen, where you can be like, I want to feel energetic, a little giddy, a little euphoric. And they're like, okay, here's the one for you. And you can almost feel what they're actually describing on Leafly. When I discovered Leafly, I was like, this is absurd, right? The rating systems are ridiculous. But then you try one and go look at the Leafly thing and you're like, okay, it's kind of on point. They kind of know what what it's doing to you.
I overheard in a dispensary once a guy in there, and he said, the bud tender was like, so, what do you want this for? He was like, oh, my wife and I are going to rent a movie tonight. And she said, really, what genre? we have some over here for action movies. We have some over here for romantic comedies.
It's amazing. It's really, this is why it's so much fun for someone who just loves to learn, because there are so many ways there's so many ways that this is just the beginning. I think people buy on right now. I think a lot of people buy on the, how high a percentage of THC versus the price. So you've got two numbers, stuff. And I agree with one of them, which is you do need to know. But I really, for me, whenever I get so many questions, and I always recommend, try and find a balanced strain with CBD and THC. If you have any edible, make sure there's CBD in it, especially if it's your first one. Do not get more than 5 milligrams. Cut your edible in half. We have an episode that is called Cut Your Edible in Half. And I hear you that you might be sort of not having the night that you want, but maybe you try it on a night when you're by yourself. This is also where sex comes in. Sex and cannabis is a huge topic. It's one of the most searched topics that we have. And the recommendation I have is try cannabis by yourself before you bring a partner in, because you need to know how you feel so that then you can share it, because there are all kinds of complications within intimacy and just understanding yourself. And I think that with sex, it makes a lot of, people get it immediately, oh yeah, I would rather know how I feel before I'm bringing a partner in the mix. But I think it works for everything. And smoking weed alone, I'm sure, people hearing that might be like, oh, that sounds maybe not the best thing, but it's an experiment. Keep a journal, write everything that's happening. It's not, it can be an incredibly fun and exciting thing to learn about, especially if you are not really getting what you want from the other things that you're using in your life to relax, to have fun, or to deal with any of your health issues.
So when you go to I'm sure you're at a lot of conferences these days or meetings for the industry. What's the balance between people like you and people who just want to get high?
I think most people that work in the cannabis industry are here because they or someone they love has had their life transformed by it. There are certainly bad actors who just want to make a lot of money, but the cannabis industry is so challenging that I think a lot of them have been and continue to sort of be washed out. And I think that that's one answer to your question. I think most people that work in weed like to get high. There's certainly an element of people who do not consume at all. And there are a lot of opinions about that from many people in the industry. I don't really like to judge. I think that it's a complicated, if you choose not to consume cannabis and work in cannabis, it does seem a little bit incongruous to me. But I definitely do not think that everyone in the cannabis industry is getting high all the time. And I think that's sort of the much more prevalent stereotype. It is on most podcasts, people ask me if I'm high. I am not. They ask if I smoke weed all day. There are all kinds of questions like that. And I consume cannabis every day, but it's usually in a CBD form. I am a low dose person. Microdosing is something that is, our most popular episode last year was called Microdosing Cannabis, which is really just taking small amounts so that you're really not feeling any intoxication, but you are feeling those balancing effects in your endocannabinoid system. So stress, sleep, pain, sex, things like that. I think that most people who've been in the industry for a while really understand that those are the longer term benefits. And the people who love to get high, it's interesting because so many people who have consumed cannabis for a long time are brand new to the legal market too. And so while, you may have an incredibly deep relationship with cannabis spanning decades, you still may not know what to buy when you go to a dispensary or,
Totally.
what to eat with an edible. And so I just think that it's an incredible moment. And there's so many ways that all different kinds of people can be a part of consuming the plant, but also the industry. One of my favorite things to do is to sit outside a dispensary in San Francisco, just like if there's a coffee shop across the street or something, and just watch every single kind of person walk in. Everyone, all ages, men, women, everything. It's just like, it's an incredible plant.
What is and Matt, this question's for you too. What's your favorite stoner movie? Pineapple Express?
I do love
Dazed and
that one.
Confused.
But I was going to go there. Dazed and Confused is one of my it's such a masterpiece. And then I do have a bit of a soft spot for Stacy Keach's performance in Up in Smoke as well. Like, I think I just love it. It's so good.
I love Pineapple Express too, but Dazed and Confused for me is just the classic.
Those guys, Cheech and Chong, seem to be back on the scene. They're sort of coming across my social feeds, doing little bits together again. Maybe they know it's the cyclist turn, the 40-year cyclist. So they're getting ready for the second round.
Yeah,
I think one of them has a brand.
I'm sure
one of them has product.
Now, one of the great scenes in Dazed and Confused, just while we're there, that somebody was talking about this recently when I was just having conversation one night, and they were saying there used to be a certain cachet with like showing up at a party with a joint. It's like, there's that scene in, Revenge of the Nerds where like Booger's like, here we go, Wonder Joints. And he makes the party, he pulls out all these joints. But, it's funny now, somebody pulls out a joint at a party and it's like, what? So you stopped at the dispensary on the way here? Big fucking deal. You know what I mean? Like it did sort of, one thing that legalization has done is it's kind of taken a little bit of the mystique out of the person at the party with the joint. And in Dazed story, to bring it back to Dazed and Confused, when Mitch gets in the car and I think it's Matthew McConaughey's character is like, "Do you got a joint, man?" He said, "No, not on me." Well, you'd be a lot cooler if you did. Yeah.
In New York, it's still not legal. So I have been to a smokers social club called the Astor Club. Where they had a Super Bowl party. What was it called? It was like, they had some alcohol there, but basically everyone was high. I don't think I've ever been to other than that place, to a sort of a public place where the point of it was people smoking. Do they have those in California? They must, right?
Consumption Lounge.
Okay.
Several of them had opened before COVID. A lot of them closed. Las Vegas right now, I think, just announced that they're, the next step in getting towards opening them is happening, and that'll be a really interesting thing to see. But yeah, consumption lounges exist in different states. They, I haven't been to one since COVID, I don't think.
Yeah, these guys are COVID. Astor Club is on the down low, right? They're positioning themselves for legalization, but it's you got to know someone to know where it is.
I'm glad I know you, Duff. Next time I'm in New York, slip me a little envelope with the address on it.
All right. Well, look, we're running a little short on time here. Ellen, what is so we had Acapulco Gold is your favorite strain. Is there a I actually know in New York, Jason Ackerman, the founder of Fresh Direct, is working. His next move may be in retail weed. Is there a so if someone is just stepping in here, is there a brand or a company, like, how do you recommend to people? Where do you point them to?
Yeah, I mean, I generally tell people, I try to recommend strains and like let them have some guardrails on what to expect with the strains. And then with edibles, my favorite edibles range from about a 20-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD, which is 1 part THC, 20 parts CBD to a 1-to-1. And that's the perfect match for me. There's a brand in California that also exists. I think it's in at least 12 states called Kiva. And they have a 3-to-1 that I give away. I gave some this weekend. It's a gift that I do show up with a lot, and I call them warm hugs. It's like just going to make you feel like you got a warm hug. So a 3-to-1 ratio edible is generally where I say people should start. See how you feel. Maybe you want a 1-to-1, maybe you want a 20-to-1, maybe you want something that is stronger. But edibles take 1 to 2 hours to feel, and they can last for up to 8 hours. So if you don't like how you feel, you can use my CBD trick, but in general, it's just easier to start slow, start with a lower dose and enjoy that time. And so, kind of 3-to-1 edibles would be that'll give you the warm hug feeling.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been great. Listeners, her podcast again is How to Do the Pot. Website's the same.
DoThePot.com.
DoThePot.com. There's some great episodes in there. Go check it out. And good luck with it. Good luck continuing to ride this wave.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Nice meeting you.
You too.
So that's Ellen Scanlon. Like I said, known her for a couple decades. Haven't hung out much because she's been on the West Coast for a while, but I used to see her fairly frequently around the turn of the millennium. She's what a sweetheart.
Yep, really easy to talk to. Great taste in stoner movies too.
Right, Acapulco Gold too. It means she's legit. We came into this thinking, I'd said to you at some point, I wasn't sure. I thought that cannabis use for men and women was the same. She persuaded me otherwise.
Yeah, no, me too.
Yeah.
I think, if you're looking also, she's thinking about so much so on the like health benefits side. So, endometriosis, for example, not a problem that man is going to ever encounter in himself.
But also just how people think. I hadn't really thought through the differences in how we think and how we relate to the stigma or legality and stuff. It hadn't occurred to me that you could draw such a line between male and female, but it does seem so. But yeah. She's she is right though. Like it wasn't that long ago I was somewhere where somebody just bought weed. I can't believe we still do that.
What do you mean?
Right? Instead of buying a specific strain, mixed percentages and stuff. Yeah.
The demographic part is interesting too, though, right? Like the sort of like not just the kind of gender split there, but also what never occurred to me is I always thought the older generation who was maybe really reluctant to ever, try it or even talk about it would always kind of be like that, like, oh, young whippersnappers and their weed, their devil's
reefer
wheat
madness.
Or whatever they call it. Yeah. Reefer madness. But shortly after legalization, I found myself in a tennis game with 3 septuagenarians, 3 old 70s guys in their 70s.
And they were all high.
Well, no, afterwards, a guy who owned a dispensary, who was kind of, I guess, related to one of the old guys, I think it was the son-in-law of one of these old guys, came up and pulled a vape out and kind of passed it around. And I was like, there's no way. And 2 of the 3 of these old guys were like, will it, sure. Will it help with my bad knees? And they, and one of them was trying it for the first time. And I was like, oh, it's legal now. And you're old. You're in constant pain. Why not? Right? Like what's keeping me from doing it anymore? The stigma is kind of gone.
I've heard that a lot of stories about.
Oh yeah, and since that was just early on in legalization, and since I've heard that story told a few times. Yeah.
So yeah, check it out, listeners. How to Do the Pot. Ellen is building an empire. She thinks a little more ambitiously than we do here at How to Tickle Yourself about, are we an audio first community of Or what are we? Or we're just a couple of dudes talking on the internet?
Just a couple of armchair non-experts chit-chatting about things. Yeah.
The tickles of life. All right. So I've got one for you. This one is very unorthodox. And it may have just been a joke in this show that I saw, and I didn't really have time to confirm. So have you seen the Netflix show Enola Holmes?
Yes, the movie, right? There's the
movie. There's two now.
Oh, that's right. I haven't seen the second one, but I watched the first one with my younger daughter, with Daphne. I liked it. It was cute. Yeah, with Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things. Yeah.
And in the second one, she's a wonderful actress. She's got great sense of humor. She knows how to interact with the camera and stuff really well in ways that are different than Stranger Things. So anyway, there was some mystery that is, going on in Victorian London, right? And back in the day, it shouldn't surprise that like there were factories that, the big factory was like the matchmaker, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of the poor women in the slums worked at the matchmaker, right?
Yeah.
And
mixing up sulfur and rolling it up into little balls and sticking it on the heads or something.
In matchboxes. Yeah. Remember matchboxes? Those were so great. But they had in it their annual party. It was the Matchmaker's Ball.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Right. And I was like, wait a second. Have they always been referring? Did it start off? Were they referring to actual matchmakers?
Yeah. Or are they referring to themselves like once a year? Matchmakers Ball. Right? Like they're ballers. Matchmakers are ballers once a year.
So
nice.
There you go.
Triple.
All right. All right. And then we have an Oribindo here that this is an unusual one for the end because it made me think of something, how the way we think about things changes and the way we think about different words changes. So I'm going to read a quote, but then I want to make a point. He's talking about the whole thing in Oribindo and also the Bhagavad Gita. This is from his book, Essays on the Gita. He's talking about, they're talking about detachment, whereas if you can get out of the way of your own ego, you can be more receptive to the cues in the situations you're in and more likely than not figure out the right thing for you to do as long as you're right.
Getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own way. So he says here, the works of the ego personality are a separative running counter to the bias of universal nature. This false movement must be replaced by a wise and still passivity in the hands of the universal and eternal power, a passivity that makes us adaptable to the infinite action, in harmony with its truth, and plastic to the shaping breath of the spirit. And then it occurred to me, I was like, oh, plastic used to be a good word. And as an adjective, right? So if you take a plastic bag, right?
Yeah.
It'll take the shape of whatever is in it.
It can be molded, right?
Yeah,
like you stick it in injection molds and stuff. Yeah. I didn't know, it never occurred to me that plastic as a word predated like the petroleum byproduct or whatever it is.
So they made a thing that was the noun of the adjective that came before it.
Cool.
So plastic ain't all bad, people. Like you want to be plastic yourself to the shaping breath of the spirit so that you can, take your cues from the infinite spirit within you and it'll make everything easier.
Just don't be a single-use plastic.
Exactly. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you in a week.
Bye-bye.
At the present moment, traveling town to town, the mystery of the motion right here, right now. Right here, right now. Whoa, right here, right now.
You've been listening to How to Tickle Yourself with your hosts Duff McDonald and Matt McButter. You can help us by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. You can talk to us and see what else is happening on Instagram and Facebook at How to Tickle Yourself. This program was recorded in Studio B of the historic Rockledge Recording Studio and the Tunnel Under Arundel. Right Here, Right Now, our original 16-part theme music was written and recorded by the legendary Paul Reddick and Kyle Ferguson of the Sidemen, with the brilliant Steve Mariner on bass and drums and in the mixing room. The podcast is produced and distributed by Storic Media. Our editor is Andrew Steiner. Our coordinator is Samantha Abramovitz. Our producers are Kristen Verbitsky and Chuck LaBella. For more information, visit storicmedia.com. That's STORIC media.com.
My love, my dear. Oh, everything's connected. This life, this world.